All right, so thank you to Whit O'Brien's here, and I want to thank my peers at the other four major salvage companies for giving me the opportunity to present here and talk to you guys covering kind of what we do, salvage companies, and then specifically to this case. So just a quick little background about Ardent. We're a relatively new name out in the industry. Major partners are Maersk and Crowley. We have a global coverage here. Here in the United States, our primary depots would be here in Houston and then again in Miami. Again, we have coverage throughout the world, but for the purposes of this exercise, OPA 90 related, we'll focus on the Houston and the Miami equipment depots. So as many of you may have heard, MRA or Switzer, that's kind of how the OPA 90 program started, and now we're, Ardent, we're kind of in the process of transferring over, contracts from, if you had an MRA contract with us or a Switzer contract into new Ardent contracts. We have four major strategic partners here for towing, Crowley and McAllister, firefighting, IES, and for lightering or pumping, we have marine pollution control. Again, as I just spoke, quickly, we have the two-tiered kind of system to provide coverage in all captain and port zones throughout the U.S. Again, our major depots are Houston and Miami. And then through our strategic partners and subcontractors, we cover these major ports. And then again, with the subcontractors totaling over 800 towing vessels, and 80 plus subcontractors, we have coverage within all of the United States. Again, so I'm going to kind of talk about what the salvage marine firefighting perspective is overall, based kind of using the requirements as my guide as I walk through this, and then I will touch base on the Stena Penguin and how we would respond to this at each step. Given this particular incident, it is already hinted at, and it's quite obvious that this will turn into an incident command post involving a lot of different partners from local, federal companies, QIs, and so forth. This is not just kind of a small case where it's just going to be the company, the insurers, and local Coast Guard. This is going to be a full-blown event. So we would have an incident command post. As you can see down there, where salvage will fall under the operations section, we'll have our own little group in there. Just want to kind of say how we work in the ICP system or the ICS system is, as a salver, we're kind of parallel, but in the same time working within the incident command system. We get the notification right away and we start responding and mobilizing our own assets, whereas the ICP is getting stood up, and that takes some time. Everyone's showing up and getting kind of in step, and we'll start our initial actions and then work directly with the incident commander. And then once the incident command post is set up, then we'll kind of fall in and work with them from there. One of the particular things about the incident command post with salvers is you have the on-site salvage master, who's going to be the salvage master on the actual vessel on scene, taking charge of how operations are handled there. And then we're going to also have another salvage master, the same level of experience in the incident command post, to communicate with the incident commander. And so therefore the communication between on-site and then an incident command post is, there's really nothing lost in translation. Again, this is kind of when we start off. Everyone has their vessel response plan. As soon as you call your QI with your incident and they call Ardent, that's when we activate and we start mobilizing. And that's the planning P, as we may discuss tomorrow, or you may be familiar with already. So here, this is basically how we're going to work through all the different 19 services that are provided, and I'm going to kind of talk about each one and how this is going to affect with the Stena Penguin here. So first and foremost, we get the call and we do our remote assessment within 1 hour. As this is a nearshore incident, within 1 hour of our notification from the QI, we're going to have our salvage master make a phone conference with the vessel master and speak directly with them. As for our clients, they have a incident checklist that we provide, and our salvage master will go through this and they'll ask various questions pertaining to the incident, the state of the vessel, and so forth. And our salvage masters are generally all licensed masters on limited tonnage, so they have a pretty good idea of how to speak with a master. Once the remote assessment is completed, they take those details and they pass them off to our naval architects. And our naval architects start plugging those into a system, a computer-based model, and begin their structural assessment. In this particular case with this incident, we have very limited information that there was a collision and the vessel still is under power and is beginning to anchor, and it has a breach in the, I believe it was number 4 starboard tank. Salvage master is going to take that into consideration, and this phase is all stabilization. So we're just trying to make sure that everything's stable, and so that we can do a further detailed assessment. Within 6 hours, we are required to have a on-site assessment, basically to verify what was talked about during the remote assessment and see if there's anything further, and that's going to be by a qualified personnel. In this particular case, we generally use a subcontractor with divers. Here in Houston, it would be Global Diving, and they would go out and they conduct it. Also, since it's local here in Houston and we have personnel, they would be along with that, with the divers to conduct that assessment. During this period, as we see that this is going to ramp up into a major event, we would be mobilizing any personnel and equipment that we believe based on the remote assessment to Houston and to the scene and get that moving. Particular, that second salvage master, making sure that we have them on site. Complete a structural assessment, again, 12 hours, and then hull and bottom survey is 12 hours. Hull and bottom survey, the divers, they depending on the nature of the situation, they would either put a diver in the water or they have an ROV. They could put down and do an assessment of the hull and see if there's any underwater breaches that are not apparent to the vessel crew. One thing I just want to point out, once you start getting into the on-site assessment period here, and you're going to be standing up an incident command post, these time frames are probably going to change significantly because the incident commander is the only person capable of changing the time requirements. Now, if we were doing this without a full-blown incident command post, these are the time frames we would be bound by. Once we start an incident command post, we would then be working with the Coast Guard, their salvage engineering response team, CERT, on everything that we are doing here. We're going to be cross-referencing and getting approval. And working with the vessel's owners and the vessel's insurance to make sure that we know that, what steps were going on. Again, this is just kind of cover some of the information that we're going to be asking. Basically, there's going to be a lot of these questions, probably the vessel master, and just kind of the very basics, the name, the location, what happened. But some of the biggest ones we're going to ask are going to be, for pre-incident drafts, post-incident drafts, capacity plans, and so forth. Then we can start plugging that information into the computer-based model and start seeing if we need to do internal transfer or a lightering and so forth, depending on the nature of the incident. In this particular case, with a breach in the hull, could be looking at if there's any space within the ship to transfer to help stabilize or correct a list if there appears to be one, or in the event that there might be the need to lighter, start developing that plan. Again, once we basically get to this point, this is when your incident command post is fully running. In that that vicious little cycle, that's basically a meeting every couple hours, a meeting to plan, in that meeting, you're talking about how you're going to do things and so forth. Again, down here, you have your onshore and offshore salvage teams, and then the incident command post. So a lot of moving parts there. As we continue here on this particular case, given the information we have, the vessel was going to anchor. We would, given the availability of resources, probably mobilize two Z-drive tugs in the area right there in Galveston. G&H Towing, they have a good selection. Send them over there just to be on standby. Since the particular area of this incident is high traffic and there's a lot of shallow area around. So if the vessel's just anchoring in spot, put them out there to assist, and then potentially look at, with the Coast Guard, maybe a transit plan, put them to Anchorage. I believe that there's the Anchorage area, Charlie, just a little bit southeast of the incident location. That's an option that we could look at, to put them in a safe haven and potentially reopen the port a little quicker. Says a salvage plan down here, 16 hours. That's a very fluid document. Once you stand up an incident command post, we're going to be working with all the aforementioned agencies and partners to develop this incident or this salvage plan. And that salvage plan really is going to incorporate anything that we covered. If it's going to be, towing or just transferring, lightering, firefighting, anything like that. That's what's going to be in that salvage plan. And so in incident command post, we're going to be working very closely with the Coast Guard for approval. And that salvage plan will then be typically an amendment in the IEP, the Incident Action Plan, that is developed from all the planning meetings. Emergency transfer operations, again, in this particular situation, this is if we need to transfer product within the vessel. If the vessel is completely dark ship, it has no power, we can bring pumps and so forth through marine pollution control. We can pump and transfer, with external pumps within the ship, or if it comes down to it needing to go over here to emergency lightering, you can resource another vessel, come alongside, and then with Coast Guard approval, which will take a lot of work, you can lighter the vessel there in the port if approved. These I wouldn't really say in this incident are high on the likelihood. However, if it did appear that the vessel did sink, be capable of developing a refloating plan. Again, this would be through coordination with the Coast Guard. Again, given the information we have on the incident, the vessel was still floating and appeared to have its own power. Temporary repairs, this could be anything from a temporary patch. Divers come along and weld up a patch, or there's other various methods of patching the hole, and so that the vessel can transit to a pier or somewhere safer to do further lightering. Special salvage operations or subsurface product removal and heavy lift. Again, these are just time frames associated with it. Subsurface product removal, again, this is if the vessel sank all the way to the bottom, we'd be prepared to remove all hazardous material or pollutants from the vessel prior to raising the vessel. Is typically how those operations will go. And heavy lift, I don't foresee that being involved in this particular scenario. Again, it says estimated, just since the resources for heavy lift are just very limited within the U.S. and really internationally. So the Coast Guard has recognized that as not really being something that you can put a time frame on. And last but not least, over here on the 19 services, is firefighting. Given the nature of this, in the product, there could be the potential of a fire. There was nothing indicated at the beginning. However, through IES, we would probably conduct, if the salvage master in the initial remote assessment deemed necessary, we would engage with IES and conduct a remote assessment with the master based on firefighting. Believe, if there was the threat of firefighting, and then potentially be mobilizing. We have external firefighting systems, which is like a 3,200 gallon per minute pump that we can put on the back of a towboat or whatnot, and it has applicators for AFFF and bring it out on site and assist any other firefighting resources available. So if the scenario does tend to go down that, we'd also have that prepared and provide that service as well. Again, not necessarily indicating of any sort of fire threat. We could also put fire teams or just systems. Down here, the area contingency plan and resources. This is something that the Coast Guard has for every cap in the port area and zone, where they kind of pre-identified most of the resources in those areas and or safe havens or anchorages, depending on what it may be. If you have a vessel on fire in port, are there dedicated piers to move a vessel on fire to fight the fire there? Again, that doesn't seem to be the case in this particular situation. However, working with the Coast Guard, we would meet at all their pre-established staging areas and follow the ACP as indicated here. One thing I do want to just kind of throw out, given this scenario, with our point of view is we want to stabilize the situation. We want to make sure that things don't get worse. And we also understand there's going to be a priority list of what's the most important aspect. Obviously safety of life, then pollution. If there was a security threat, the Coast Guard may deem, you guys stand by while we figure out this other stuff. And again, we won't take any steps without being safe, following the safety plan, and or without approval from the Coast Guard and the company. So with that. That's we're a little over 15 minutes, but that kind of is our approach to this particular situation and how we would respond to it.